My name is Benedicte. I'm a professor at the Center for Development and the Environment, and I'm leading the Norwegian Latin America Research Network. I'm so fortunate to be invited to co-organize with Publish What You Pay this lunch seminar. It's been amazing over the last 6 years. It's been amazing to observe many very positive developments in the region. But there remain, and I think that many of them are very well connected. And they're connected to significant extent to lack of transparency. Latin America is at the same time the most resource-rich, the most unequal, and the most violent region in the world. At the core of many of the problems are lack of transparency of where money flows. But before starting to argue why I think that is a key problem, I would just like to ask, it's hard to ask people in this kind of setting, but does any one of you know who the major countries that invest in Latin America are? If we start with Brazil, who knows what country is the principal investor to Brazil?
China.
China? Other proposals? India? Anyone else? It's the Netherlands. Who would believe that? If you look at this table, this is in Spanish, I'm sorry about that. It's the one down here. Los Países Bajos is the Netherlands in Spanish. In 2013, it was the without any doubt principal investor to Brazil. In 2012, it was beaten by the United States, but it has been an important investor over the last years. China doesn't appear in the list, nor does India. And the United States is beaten by the Netherlands. It's actually beaten by another category as well, and I'm going to show you that. Wait a second, that was a bit too fast. That is the desconocido, which is the unknown. The desconocido is the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and you see in the Dominican Republic, the unknown investors account for 60%. And here, the Europe category includes the Netherlands, which is also, of course, just a kind of passing country for investment that comes from elsewhere, including China. And I think that shows a lot about the problems of tracking who owns what in Latin America, which is probably not unique at all to Latin America, but it has not improved. I encountered this problem I didn't actually know that it was like that until I started to study the relationship between Brazil and China didn't appear anywhere in terms of investments. You have to go and look at the special project, and journalists would dig up who is actually the owners of this, the company that is putting this, it can be everything from bridges to all sorts of different factories. But the transparency issue is not has some particular consequences in Latin America for various reasons. One is that Latin America is one of the most resource-rich regions in the world, and the extraction of natural resources has exploded over the last years. The exports of primary mining products only has fifth-folded between 2000 and 2010. And it will probably increase further as a major share of global investments in explorations for new mines has been destined to Latin America over the years. However, the support that mining provides for governmental coffers vary a lot. In some cases, it's minimal due to very low royalties and low taxes. In Guatemala, for example, that we will hear much more about here, it represents 0.3% of the state's fiscal income, and that is considering that Guatemala is the country which also collects the least income from taxes. But we all know that mining plays a major role in Guatemala. In general, the income has increased between threefold and fourfold, which is much less than the exports has increased. But it is striking that even in a country like Chile, with presumably strong governmental institutions, the state-owned company represent 2/3 of governmental income, but only 1/3 of governmental of the production. The private companies, on the other hand, represent 2/3 of the production, but only 1/3 of the income, which is to say that the government is mainly able to capture the income mainly of the state-owned companies and much less through taxes and royalties of the private companies. With oil and gas, it's a little bit different because it's mainly state-owned still, or at least in a lot of countries, it's predominantly state-owned. But what we can safely conclude is that Latin America could have earned a lot more from their vast exports of natural resources than what's currently the case, if the companies were obliged to pay more taxes and if they were not able to evade it. Another important feature of Latin America is its general low level of tax income. This this red little table, it is a bit old. It's from 2008, but still, it shows the percentage of direct taxes as of indirect taxes. It's supposed to be the wrong title as a percentage of GDP. Indirect taxes, income taxes, and business taxes, which shows that it's extremely low, also compared to most other developing countries. The blue table shows the major difference between the different countries. You have Guatemala at the bottom. This is total taxes, where they collect 10% of GDP as taxes. And then you have Brazil, which is more at almost the level of the OECD countries. But there's a lot of countries that find themselves down at the bottom, close to Guatemala, including Mexico, which is a major industrial nation. And a third feature, and I'm going to argue soon why I think this is connected, and my colleague will talk much more about that, is the high levels of violence. You've seen, okay, so that was inequality. We jumped to violence. This is just homicide rates, which is just one little very crude feature, crude indicator of violence. But it shows that Latin America and the Caribbean have 13 of the top 20 homicide rates in the world. And I don't think you can understand that without also looking at inequality levels. This is a comparison, it's just a comparison of Gini coefficient, which is again a very crude and very poor, not terribly poor, but it only shows a tiny little bit of the picture. It shows that Latin America has decreased its inequality, but it's still on top. It's still the world champion of income inequality. So why are these connected, and what relevance does it have for development and the environment, and how does it relate to lack of transparency? I would say that the low levels of tax income and high levels of violence are both connected to lack of transparency, and they both reinforce inequality. Just to give you one example, in inequality, one of the countries that I've studied most, all companies have at least 3 books. One for the tax authority, where they make almost no money, one for the banks, where they appear as very successful, and one secret. I worked for a Guatemalan company myself, and my boss thought I was crazy when I was about to answer a call from the tax authority, and he was about to fire me because I had the inclination to try to help this guy. And I think that's quite, that was not a unique experience from Guatemala. Companies argue that they're secretive for security reasons because of the high levels of violence. They're afraid of kidnappings, they're afraid of assaults. But in the end, when economic relations are characterized by a lack of transparency to start with, organized crime more easily get a stronghold, which in turn generates more violence. And the result is a combination of lack of public income, high levels of violence, and also the exclusion of actors as businessmen, as participants in the economic life, and again, it reinforces inequality. But, of course, people that are excluded from the system, that are the victims of many of these forces, are not passive observers to what's going on in Latin America. They claim their rights, and faced with opaque investments, and often allied with public and private security organizations. And that creates a lot of conflict. That is the topic that my colleague Mariel Støen will speak about. Please.
My name is Mariel Støen, as Benedicte said, and I also work at the Center for Development and the Environment at the University of Oslo. The Latin American region has seen, during the last 15 an increase in conflicts related to the environment. These conflicts have at their core demands against political, social, ethnic, and economic exclusion. They call attention to everyday life, to diverse identities, and to different subjectivities, as well as to unequal access to resources of many kinds, but that include natural resources. Socio-environmental conflicts are struggles for access to and control of natural resources, struggles for more fair and equitable distribution of risks and benefits arising from extractive industries, hydropower development, biofuel industries, and large infrastructure development. Many of these conflicts build on past and unsolved conflicts, in particular those related to access to land, land tenure, and land distribution. And Edwin Chota was assassinated not long ago in Peru, fighting for precisely these issues. In general, it can be said that the claims of social movements struggling against the inception of extractive industries and other projects in their territories are related to institutional aspects as well as to strategic demands. Institutional aspects refer to claims for participation in environmental decision-making, for the better functioning of the state and the government, or are demands stemming from unsolving conflicts in the past. Strategic demands are related to freedom. Freedom to choose the life that one would like to live with dignity. Socio-environmental conflicts in Latin America are telling us something about the prevalent inequality and exclusion that characterize most Latin American societies. Apart from income, inequality in income, of what Benedicte has talked about, and access to services, inequality is related to lack of possibilities to influence decision-making in that which will affect the lives of thousands of people and allow them to live lives with dignity. Inequality results in part, at least, from the denial of otherness, and this is related to the racist base of many Latin American societies. In most Latin American societies, there exist formal guidelines for citizens' participation in decision-making. Many Latin American countries have even ratified the ILO 169 Convention on the Rights of Indigenous and Tribal Peoples, but there is a lack of formal mechanisms that will ensure meaningful participation of most people, and most important, there is a lack of political will to do so. These two factors, combined with remnants of an authoritarian political culture, result in violent conflicts. When these conflicts arise, those involved in the protests are seen by the government, by the companies, as subalterns in racial and gender terms, and are framed in the official discourse as the enemy to be conquered, destroyed, or both. The response from governments and companies has been violence and criminalization of social protest, which is a right guaranteed by the political constitution of all Latin American countries. The use of the police and the military to meet protests and demonstrations is common. We have seen that very often. In terms of institutional weaknesses, I would like to make reference to only one, because of the short time that I am supposed to talk, only one of the many I could talk about, and that is the processes of environmental and social impact assessments. These instruments that are internationally conceived and standardized to ensure that negative social or environmental impact assessments, impacts are assessed before a project starts, have become the space for manipulation from the part of companies and governments, and of contestation and protest from the part of those opposing large projects. In many cases, the responsibility to involve local population in these assessments is left in the hands of private companies, who usually hire private consultants to conduct the studies. Consultants are often asked to secure community support for the projects to be developed, and this commonly results in dubious practices, in which consultants often offer gifts or money to gain or to buy people's support and consent. They simply do not provide reliable information, and this also has an effect on internally in communities where there are also conflicts between people who are in favor or against projects. Or even worse, consultants might not understand the dynamics and particularities or the history of the places where they are working. We have examples of that. Governments often lack the necessary resources to ensure that these assessments are conducted in a proper manner. And some public servants have told us in Guatemala, for instance, that within the ministries, they face pressure to quickly approve environmental and social impact assessments. Activists, on their part, have been able to forge alliances with scientists and NGOs, and more often than not, they have found biases and weaknesses in the environmental and social impact assessments. And they have also found out that there's a lack of information and lack of transparency. To me, it is clear that more openness and transparency will create more fair and more sustainable practices. Trust is necessary for the functioning of democracies, and trust can only be built when all parts are recognized as equal bearers of rights and obligations. Thank you.